Okie dokie, so we've got the StarCraft 5.0.11 patch notes. They've been released. It's live on the ladder. We've got those 7 new maps in the pool, as we had theorized. And it's out already on the North American server. As I record this, I had no idea. It's been weeks of people saying, when's the new patch coming out? Well, guess what? We've got brand new 7 maps. The same maps you've seen in the last few weeks in the ESL Weekly Cups. They're going to be played at Katowice, Royal Blood, Altitude, Babylon LE, Ancient Cistern, Grespin, Dragon Scales, and Neo Humanity. You guys can check out my earlier video if you haven't already, where I was theorizing what the new maps were and also looking at a lot of these back in the Team Liquid map contest in a video from several months ago. Check this out, guys. Worker units. Because of Worker's low deceleration as a result of their mine behavior, they felt very unresponsive when ordered to attack nearby units. Now, I don't know about you guys. If you haven't watched much of my stream, I like to over Worker harass, and if I do that, that Worker has a name. He's kind of like Batman. His name is Captain Dickhead. And I love that guy. I love him. He's so much fun. So he's going to be even more fun to micro now. I think it's pretty damn slight, but I think it's going to be cool because you can kind of probably like shoot and then move and maybe even drift with those workers a little bit as you're kind of getting those attacks in. This basically is a low-key buff to Hero, the most annoying player with his probe harass already in the game, and he's going to be twice as annoying now. So that's awesome. Now, there haven't really been that many changes. What's cool is there have been dev comments added by all the people who helped come up with this. We all know about the Balance Council, lots of pro gamers and different people who are in there, pro gamers of every different race who all put their heads together to help theorize this and veto each other's options, say, no, that's unfair. Oh, that sounds fair. So you guys have already heard me talk about pretty much all of these changes. We're just going to go through basically creep spread. The sight range is ever so slightly less, and the creep spreads a little bit less frequently. You don't notice the difference unless the opponent is like really non-stop spreading creep. In a high pressure game, it's very hard to realize that the creep is actually spreading less slow because people almost never spread the creep on cooldown anyway, or anywhere even close to on cooldown. But in those games where the opponent of the Zerg is turtling, you are going to notice that creep doesn't cover the map quite as quickly anymore, which is, it's kind of nice. So the sight range now matches the creep spread created by the tumor. So that's kind of nice. Whereas up to now, they could always see a bit beyond the creep, which is a little bit annoying, especially when like someone would try to morph Hellbats outside of vision, but the creep would barely see one, and it would give the Zerg a head start to start pulling their queens back and getting their defense together. The creep spread interval from the hatchery, lair, and hive, this increases, and sight range also increased. This increases the vision to match the creep spread radius, similar to creep tumor sight change. The creep spread rate is increased to allow for more consistent wall-offs, as well as help with early game defense. So essentially, this is so like in ZVZ, you can wall off your natural with Evo chambers. Because that creep spreads randomly from a hatchery, it would spread in different directions, and sometimes it just wouldn't get to the edge. Your opponent would Ling Flood and you couldn't put your Evo chamber down to wall off. I'm pretty sure that's the main reason for this one. Also, the sight range increase on the hatchery, lair, and hive means that you're going to notice if someone sneaks a drone into your base, they can't hide a spine crawler on the edge of creep, whereas they used to be able to do that, and if they got away with it, it was deadly. All right, Viper. After casting Abduct, the Viper can't spam 2, so that's still going through. Basically, the Viper used to be able to go doof, doof, and abduct 2 units. Now it's like doof, doof. It's still pretty quick to abduct 2 units, so it's a very slight nerf. Ultralisk reduced size by 12.5%, and of course, the range to begin the attack is unchanged, but basically, a target can move a little bit further away before the Ultralisk attack is cancelled from 1 to 1.25 range, so they don't get as stuck against other units, and you can still kite them with Marauders and get away from the Ultra hits, but it used to be like a lot of the time the Ultra was like, didn't, and they'd run up and they'd start hitting and they wouldn't quite get it off. So really good Stalker, Marauder Micro would avoid a lot of the Ultra damage, and you really needed like either Mass Link Surrounds or Fungal or something, so that's going to be really nice. Hydralisk is getting slightly buffed move speed of about 0.19 off creep. On creep, they are just the same speed, and damage point is reduced from 0.15 to 0.1. So basically, it is the time it takes for a unit to complete its attack. Reducing this allows for more movement in between attacks. So this is a buff to Mio Micah, the cheesy Vietnamese Zerg. Being able to shoot, move, you can aggressively or defensively stutter step your Hydralisks a lot better now. So essentially, they figured that previously it was so fragile and kiting with it was not so effective, but by doing these 2 changes, the Hydra's going to be a little bit better at, say, just not getting straight up overwhelmed by like Zealots or Adepts or something like that. They said the speed is increased off creep, allow for easier retreating from engagements, repositioning the army. Something where Hydras were really good is when they won fights, it looked great, but they always struggled with like just suddenly being like, oh, we're out of Banelings, let's pull back for a moment, and the Zealot Archon would just collapse on them and they'd all die. So it does give it just a little bit more maneuverability. And this is something which a lot of players have been scared about, but I've been speaking to a lot of Protoss pros, and they say they're not too worried because Hydras still take so long to get their upgrades up, move speed and the range upgrade, and they're so expensive and fragile that they're not actually too worried about Hydralisks in general. Broodlord move speed is buffed, guys. Check it out. That is a pretty good move speed buff, a 0.27 move speed buff, so they're going to move a bit quicker. But the Broodlings, they last way less time. So in those situations where the Broodlings are being ignored and not killed, they're not going to last as long, which does massively reduce Broodlord's ability to deal damage to buildings in a base trade or something like that, something where nothing's fighting back. It does reduce their overall damage output significantly, and it more importantly just stops them from blocking units up as long. It also stops them from sieging from so far away. Dev comments, Broodlord's slow speed forces the Zerg to play defensive until the map is mined out, causing games where it is used to become very slow paced. The duration of Broodlings is reduced to weaken the units in engagements where there is nothing to quickly clear the Broodlings, right? Whereas they were too strong if there weren't any Hellbats to clear them before. It also prevents the Zerg from continuously sending waves of Broodlings from a longer distance than the Broodlord's attack range. Now, we all know about that. That's the Dark move, where Dark attacks his own creep tumors and shoots from miles away. Okay, so here's a really good example of what we're talking about. Late game Beyond Dark game from the ESL Weekly quite a few months ago, number 133. This is my own video of it. Basically, gets to a bit of a standoff, and Dark will attack his own creep tumors in order to siege his opponent with Broodlings. So let's find that moment. So he's transfusing, he's turning them into what we call the Broodlord flower, the Corruptor flower there. My God, he's basically just doing art. All right, so check it out. So Dark now is attacking his own Broodlings. So each wave, he just keeps attacking his own Broodlings and sieging. And he's using Beyond's friendly fire to kill his own units on the siege tanks, as well as the little nibbles they're doing. And he's effectively attacking, using that creep spread and everything, from like two full screens away. So what they've done is they've removed the ability for you to just siege your opponent from 2 screens away. Obviously, a lot of these changes in general, you can see from the pros, they don't enjoy stalemate games like this. They do feel it gets very arduous, and when there's a lot of games where it's consistently dragged out to the 40 or 50 minute mark and there's 2, armies screens apart, just ever so slowly chipping each other, they're not happy about it. All right, the Ravager build time is increased from 8.57 to, so basically 8.5 to 12 seconds, and removed the random delay of up to 0.36 seconds. So the random delay was when you, so check it out, we'll read the dev comment. Forces the Zerg to prepare slightly earlier to defend attacks, as well as reduces the strength of morphing roaches into Ravagers during fights to heal them, which especially in ZVZ is insanely powerful, because you can have a Ravager cocoon on 1 hit point, and when it finishes turning into a Ravager, bam, back at full hit points, which is always a little annoying. Also, the Ravagers have 5 hit points in cocoon form, 5 armor, sorry, which means Zerglings do no damage to them, Marines do almost no damage, even Zealots do very little damage to them. So the ability to like morph Ravagers to like wall things off even is kind of crazy. Making it so it takes just a little bit longer for that to morph weakens using that, make roach-based all-in slightly easier to defend in ZVT and ZVZ. It obviously also means if you are completely blindsided by an attack, you can't just morph 10 Ravagers and then defend it. You need to have a bit better scouting and awareness, whereas the ability to morph Ravagers so quickly, I felt allowed a lot of Zergs with poor scouting to survive Protoss ground-based pushes. And I think it was very frustrating as a Protoss player when you do such a good job hiding a push, the Zerg would morph 10 Ravagers as they see you moving like halfway across the map. They see you at the last second, morph 10 Ravagers, and they're able to defend with good micro. For me, it was one of those things where I think you can still absolutely defend, you just need to spot their army 3 seconds sooner, which is not really that big of an ask. Definitely is going to weaken some proxy hatch Ravager aggression and that sort of stuff a little bit though. Now the random delay is basically, if you would say morph Ravager a bunch of times, but then you'd give a move command, sometimes that random delay would be closer to 0.36 seconds because it's 0 to 0.36 seconds, right? And if it takes that whole third of a second, you might give the move command before they've finished morphing into Ravagers. So maybe only half the roaches you told to morph into Ravagers have morphed, and you don't even notice as the player. So removing things like random delay and lowering these is really allowing the game to play a lot more consistently. That's really what all these little changes are about. So if you wonder why is there this, what's this random delay? It's just, if you give an order, you want to be able to assume that that order has gone through. And a lot of these changes are just making very small changes in the engine and the stats and the numbers so that the game plays a bit more consistently. It's really cool that 12 years into the game, 13 years in, we're still figuring out these sort of changes. Now, battery overcharge, this is something I was super against because I do think Protoss is a bit fragile. But I've come to accept that most of the pros are okay with it because they feel that if someone fights in battery overcharge, it's still really good. They've said, look, the main problem is if someone can just kill the battery before it gets much healing or fight when the battery is exhausted. All this does is if you do fight into the battery, it does heal a little bit less. Now, it still heals for free, but previously battery overcharge made it difficult to take an engagement regardless of army difference until it expired unless the shield battery could be destroyed. This gives the attacker a chance to take an engagement if they have a significant army lead. So it's still going to heal at 150% rate for the duration. Doesn't cost any energy to do so, which is pretty good. It's not bad, right? It's obviously not crazy game winning or anything like that. But we'll see how that goes. I think this does hurt the Turtle Colossus styles in PvT a little bit. Observer move speed buffed, all of this stuff. I guess all these changes are pretty much just what we've already talked about, guys. Observers are going to be a bit more active, a bit higher move speed, but they're also a bit easier to see. Doesn't affect interactions with range. It's just a bit easier to spot for Terran players. Archon squeeze between walls. High Templar slightly faster. Small nerf on the Purification Nova radius, so the Disruptor can still kill a giant army, but it's unlikely to straight up just destroy quite as much. It'll kill a few less units with most of those shots. The Carrier Interceptor attack priority is reduced, great for noob players. We've talked about that a lot. The Sentry builds a bit quicker pre-Warp Gate, same warp in time once you've got Warp Gate for earlier hallucination scouts. And it's a little bit faster so it can keep up with Adepts when using Guardian Shield and that sort of stuff. Forge upgrade timings are reduced a little bit, so you're going to save about 7 seconds on each of these upgrades. A bit closer to actually 9 seconds on the level 3 upgrade. So a total of about 30 seconds off your upgrades heading to +3. That's pretty damn good, man. Scrolling on down, the Viking's going to be a little bit more microable with that attack point being reduced, or the damage point actually, sorry. Liberator's going to be 25 gas cheaper. Ghosts have a better EMP out of the gates, but they no longer have the upgrade, so it's not as good in the late game. Also, steady targeting will get cancelled if the target moves more than 13.5 range away from the ghost. So now you can run away from ghosts to avoid snipe. However, that's not going to work for Broodlords or lurkers that are like having to unburrow and then run. They're not going to get out of range in time. It's only like Ultras, Lings, Banes. If they very quickly kind of turn around, they can break the snipe by getting out of range. Now, this is one of the more controversial ones, so we'll read the dev comment on this. The maximum potential of EMP is reduced, weakening the ghosts against late-game Protoss armies and spellcasters, while giving it more power immediately. Before the enhanced shockwave upgrade would have been researched, earlier on. The steady targeting range cap reduces the punishing effect that ghosts can have against biological units, where moving anywhere near the Terran army would require a full commitment, as retreating units would always die in combination with using Scan for Vision. The ability is now manually cancelable to give more micro potential in situations where the ghost is in danger, especially when it is clear it will not be able to finish casting regardless. Now that, of course, is referring to you snipe down, but you realize the Lingbane's going to get on top. You're not going to get these snipes off. Now you can go cancel and run those ghosts backwards, whereas before they'd be stuck in that casting animation and you'd be like, well, they're dead. Hyperflight rotors, that's Banshee speed, upgrades a little bit quicker and is a little bit cheaper. I think they could have shaved another 25 minerals and 25 gas off this. I still think Banshee speed is a pretty rare upgrade. Banshees are very fragile, even though they're high damage. So we'll see how that goes. All right, guys, so Magfield, this is a controversial one. A lot of people saying it made Cyclones worse. I actually think the Cyclones are better. We saw a really cool series. The biggest one is that the lock-on autocast range is a little bit better. And even though the problem with the Cyclone, it says here is, look, it's going to make the Cyclone more well-rounded. A lot of Terran factory units are so specialized in certain roles. They're really good against one thing and terrible against other things. By lock-on prioritizing air units, it's going to help engaging against Muta Zergling, whereas it used to be your units would all lock onto the Zerglings. Now they're looking onto the Mutas. They'll lock onto air units that can attack them as the priority. So it's going to ignore something like a Phoenix, but it'll hit an Oracle or a Void Ray. It'll hit a Mutalisk. It'll ignore a Corruptor. Well, not ignore, but it'll go for the Zergling instead of the Corruptor. And that's really big. This prevents all the lock-ons being wasted on Zerglings and the mech army getting overwhelmed by Mutas, which was a big problem with Cyclones. But there are people that make the very valid argument that losing plus 10 armored, you know, so now instead of doing 40 verse armored, only doing 30, it is weaker against things like Stalkers, Prisms, Immortals, Medevacs, Siege Tanks, enemy Cyclones. It's not as extremely good at the things that it used to be good at. And a lot of people can't really see past that. And to be fair, I can't either. There's going to be an adjustment period where I'm like, oh shit, that should have killed that. And it won't anymore. But it's going to do better against Mutas, Ravagers, Queens. It's going to be doing much better against Zealots and Archons, which are often tanking all the damage as the fights get bigger against Protoss. It'll kill Marines a little bit quicker as well. And Hellions and Hellbats. It's a mixed bag. So the Cyclone is going to be more generally just useful. And I actually think this is really quite good. And I'm very interested to see where it goes. All right, guys, so there has been a mistake in the patch. The tooltip has changed, apparently, for the mag field upgrade. But once you actually get it, it's behaving the way it used to. So this should be doing 30 damage flat against everything now. But look at that, guys. It's only doing 20 damage a tick. Whereas up against the Stalker, you're going to see that's going to take 40 damage a tick. So this is just the old Cyclone behavior. So just a small little thing, and this is kind of a bit of a bummer. So, because I really want to see that one in action. Sensor Tower range reduced, that went through, slows the game down. Once again, there is a big anti-turtling message for these late split game maps. And the Terrans were totally fine with this. You know, they were like, yep, we're sick of Sensor Towers in late game TVT. Spotting everything, so reducing that by 10%, 30 to 27 vision. Lots of Maru turtle nerfs for sure. The Raven also has its gas cost reduced. It builds almost about 9 seconds quicker. They removed the energy upgrade. Anti-armor missile only reduces 2 armor rather than 3 now. And the debuff color tint on affected units is reduced. We used to call it the Dorito cannon because it was so bright orange. I guess they've adjusted the color just a little bit to make it a bit less offensive on the eyes. The auto turret doesn't last as long, guys, about 2 seconds less. It still only costs 50 energy, but it's way weaker in that 50 less hit points, 1 less armor, lasts 2 less seconds. The thing is, because you build the Ravens cheaper, you get them out earlier, they are still very effective, but they do not tank nearly as much as they used to. They will get down to just 30 hit points from a single siege tank shot. 2 tank shots, bam, gone. Whereas previously, 2 tank shots would leave it on 10 hit points. So if you dropped like 3 auto turrets in an early TVT fight, it was so good at soaking up the tank volleys. And because they were quite chunky, the splash damage wouldn't really hit any other units. So auto turrets are still going to do great damage, but they're not going to be as good at tanking. And this is actually really interesting. They're also not affected by Neo Steel armor. I don't know if they needed to do that or not. That's for like late game, I guess, massing Ravens in TVT. And that was their whole thing was, look, we want it to be more viable and easier to access as a detector unit, so a bit cheaper on gas, bit faster build. Some of the strength is removed from anti-armor missile, and auto turret durability is significantly weakened, so you can't just mass auto turret strategies, but it still is going to be used for harassment and TVP very effectively. It's still going to be a useful unit, just a little bit more accessible. So overall, I do really like this change. I think the Raven being a little bit cheaper and quicker to build makes it way more accessible, especially for TVP. I'm going to have to start learning some Raven builds so I can mix it in there, because I think a double Raven opening is pretty much perfect with this. I think you can open 2 Ravens, do some great auto turret harass, hunt down observers. It's going to be a really nice way to open up. Now, there's a bunch of whole bug fixes, quality of life changes, lots of like reducing random delay, increased maximum spawn radius. Basically, units will be able to pop out a bit further from the factory, so you don't get your tanks and Thors stuck behind your buildings as much. Less random attack delay. There was all these random bugs where, and different bad things. Like, look, before Cyclones would automatically lock on to like eggs, which was just such a waste of a lock-on because it would take forever to kill it, and then the enemy units would come in and your Cyclone's like, oh, we already used our attack on an egg. So it's just nice little changes. There was a bug where you could spam stop commands on the shield battery and it would actually heal way faster than it should be able to. So battery overcharge could heal at like double the rate, like crazy stuff. There was an issue where Adepts could not be ordered to cancel the shade ability when selected with Adepts who are warping in. just random little changes like this. So you guys go through. I don't think anyone's going to have any drama over any of these changes. Just really nice little things to make sure everything works a bit more consistently. Also, Stasis Ward attack priority. This is a really nice one. So it's going to be the same as most units. Whereas previously, you could pop a Stasis Ward down on your opponent's army, and if all their units are already fighting enemy units, they won't turn and fight it. They would always go and seek out an enemy unit. And in the middle of a fight, there's a lot going on. If you don't see that Stasis trap going down, which would happen in pro games sometimes, not often, but sometimes, you'd just be like, oh, I'm winning this fight. And then your whole army would get frozen, and they just kill all your bases while your units are frozen. You'd be like, are you serious? So this was a really frustrating thing. Parting did this move a lot. And it maybe only worked 1 in 5 or 1 in 6 times versus pros. But that 1 in 6 times where it worked, it was like really like, seriously, man, it seemed really, really unfair that you had to click on this tiny stasis trap when there's like units all above it and stuff. It was really hard to see. Yes, this is really cool. There was also an issue where units that were interference matrix couldn't be given stop commands. So that's why your like Colossus or tanks would just like derp into the front of your army and you're like, no, stop. What are you guys doing? Yeah, so this is kind of fantastic, guys. Also, spawn locusts no longer interrupts the current order. So if you're running with your swarm host somewhere, you can throw locusts and they'll keep running after throwing locusts to the previous move command. Just kind of cool. I don't know exactly when you want to do that, but hey, kind of nice. So I really like this patch. I think it's going to be really exciting. I'm very excited to have a bunch of new maps out. I will admit, I was a little worried, like Nathanias and a lot of other people, about the state of the patch sounding a bit more Zerg favored, and then seeing maps that were quite big, which are generally pretty good for Zerg versus Terran. Arguably, big maps are better for Protoss versus Zerg, because it's easier to just get to the late game where Protoss is usually favored. However, because the bases are so spread out, there's an argument that it's more Zerg favored for maps like Altitude, and potentially some of the other maps, but I'm still very undecided because I just haven't seen enough games. And as always, there's going to be people shouting at me saying, say it how it is, stop trying to cover up for this or that. This is the same thing you get every single time you watch a pig patch video. It's me going, oh, that's interesting, let's see how that goes. That's interesting, let's see how that goes. The fact is, I have an understanding of StarCraft that's very deep. And like with many things, the deeper your understanding of something, the more you realize you don't know, and it's very hard to predict the future. And that's why I will say I do feel, looking at the brand new map pool and the balance changes, I do think Zerg could do very well. On the other hand, most of the tournaments I've seen so far on the new balance patch with these changes on these maps, there's been a lot of success for players like Beyond and Hero, and not so much for the Solars and the Rainers. So is that going to continue, or are the Zergs going to figure it out? I don't know. I know we're going to see big meta shifts. We're going to see a lot more mass Zealot style, Zealot Phoenix or Zealot Stalker openings in Protoss vs Terran, because the maps are a little bit bigger, but battery overcharge isn't as good. We're going to see less Colossus kind of turtling play from the Protoss. They're going to be more active on the map. I'll also say Zergs, in general, will be using Hydras and Ultras a little bit more, but it might take longer to see a lot of Ultra play in the meta than you're expecting, simply because players haven't been using Ultras very much for a long time. Dark being one of the few players who does, Serral occasionally as well. A lot of players, it might take 3, 4, 5 months before we see a lot of Ultralisks getting used. I do think people should be using it before then, but pros are often slow on the uptake, especially when learning a new map pool. I don't really know if people are going to keep going like the Stalker Oracle stuff in this new stuff, but from what I've seen, like Hero has been really tricky in PvZ with mass Zealot, mass Stalker, pretending he's going Stalkers, then going Zealots, or doing like a Zealot pressure, but then straight up into Disruptor Archon. He's been really tricky, and I feel like Hero, you give him big, crazy maps, new balance changes. I think this might be Hero's World Championship simply because he's so good at flowing into a new balance situation and just figuring stuff out on the fly. I think that's what we're going to probably see most favored early on here. There's an argument that no, that doesn't matter. The changes aren't big enough. The maps are consistent enough. It's still going to be Serral. It's still going to be Maru. It's still going to be the big dogs. I don't friggin' know. I know Katowice is up in just a couple weeks. It's about a week and a half, 2 weeks away. So it's going to be bloody exciting. Get on the ladder. It's already live on North America. It'll be live on EU and Korea within the next 12 hours, one day at the absolute most. Before we go, I want to also say I want to see much bigger changes. I was talking about this yesterday in my channel. So I was talking to Scarlett about this yesterday in my Twitch channel, and I was like, I think we can all agree we want to see bigger changes. And she was like, yeah, me too. But hey, Pig, wild thought. 2 weeks before a world championship. Do you think now is the time to try them? And I was like, you have a good point there, Scarlett. I agree with you on that one. I do. But if we can get another patch in the near future after that, hopefully we can try some more wild things, and we can all hopefully encourage the pro gamers, the community members, and the people who are influencing balance heavily to try crazier things and to get out there and rework the lurker to make it maybe more accessible but not as powerful. More things to de-incentivize turtling. We've already done a great job of making Protoss vs Zerg into a way more fun matchup from the Void Ray meta, which is of course where Blizzard left Protoss vs Zerg and where the community took over. We've made PvZ great again. Hopefully we can keep doing that with the map pool and with the balance changes and push for bigger, greater, and funner changes to just keep the meta fresh, keep the game changing and evolving. Let me know what you guys want to see in those future patches, and we'll see you in the next one. See you all out there on the ladder. Have a good one.